Have you ever felt like you're searching for God in all the wrong places? Like you're reaching toward the heavens, pleading for a sign, desperately trying to feel a presence that seems frustratingly distant and elusive? What if I told you that the greatest spiritual tragedy of our time isn't God's absence, but our fundamental misunderstanding of where the divine actually dwells? For years, perhaps even decades, you've been conditioned to believe that God exists somewhere out there, beyond the clouds, in sacred buildings, or accessible only through intermediaries and complex rituals. You've been taught to seek externally what has been residing internally all along. This single misconception has kept countless sincere seekers trapped in a cycle of spiritual emptiness, constantly straining to connect with a presence that is, in fact, closer to you than your own breath. Has this ever happened to you? You face a moment of crisis, a health challenge, a relationship breaking apart, a financial crisis that shakes your foundation, and you cry out to God, only to feel like your prayers dissolve into silence. You wonder if you're doing something wrong, if you're not worthy enough, if perhaps God simply isn't listening to you. But here's the revolutionary truth that changes everything. The I Am presence you've been seeking outside yourself has been waiting patiently within your own consciousness this entire time. The awakening I'm about to share with you isn't just another spiritual technique or religious formula. It's a fundamental shift in perception that transforms how you experience every single moment of your existence. Imagine living each day with a tangible awareness of divine presence flowing through you, not as an occasional peak experience, but as your natural state of being. Picture making decisions guided by an inner knowing so clear and certain that anxiety becomes a distant memory. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Stay with me until the end of this teaching, because what you're about to discover might completely revolutionize your understanding of spirituality, prayer, and your relationship with the divine. The 5 sacred shifts we're exploring today aren't complicated mystical practices requiring years of training. They're simple, powerful adjustments in awareness that have helped thousands awaken to the I Am presence that Scripture promises dwells within every human being. The kingdom of heaven, that realm of divine consciousness where peace, guidance, and infinite love exist, isn't a distant destination you'll reach someday if you're good enough. It's a present reality, a state of awareness that exists within you right now, at this very moment, waiting only for your recognition. And the moment you truly grasp this truth, everything changes. The first sacred shift begins with understanding why you've been looking in the wrong direction all along, and how a simple reorientation of your spiritual awareness opens the door to experiencing God's presence, not occasionally, but continuously throughout your day. The transformation begins the moment you stop straining and start recognizing. Think about it. Everything you've been taught about connecting with God has involved effort, discipline, struggle. You've been told to try harder, pray longer, be more devoted, more worthy, more pure. But here's the hidden truth that changes the entire spiritual journey. The divine presence isn't something you achieve through effort. It's something you awaken to through awareness. This is radically different from what most spiritual teachings emphasize. The I Am consciousness within you isn't hiding, isn't playing hard to get, isn't testing your dedication. It's been broadcasting continuously, like a radio signal that never stops transmitting. The only question is whether you've tuned your awareness to the right frequency. When you approach your spiritual life from this understanding, the exhausting cycle of religious performance falls away, replaced by something far more natural and sustainable. Imagine for a moment what your mornings would feel like if you woke up already connected to divine guidance, not needing to earn it, not wondering if today you'll finally break through, but simply recognizing what's already present. This isn't wishful thinking, it's the first sacred shift that awakens the I am within you, and it's simpler than you've ever imagined. The practice of the presence doesn't require you to become a mystic or spend hours in complicated meditation. Behind the scenes of every spiritual breakthrough is this foundational recognition. The kingdom of heaven exists within you right now, not as a future reward, not as something you'll access when you're spiritually advanced enough, but as your present reality waiting only for acknowledgement. Your first waking moments hold extraordinary power. Tomorrow morning, before your feet touch the floor, before you reach for your phone, before the decisions and demands of the day flood your consciousness, pause for just a breath. Silently acknowledge this truth. The kingdom of heaven is within me right now. This divine consciousness is my true nature. These aren't magic words or empty affirmations. They're recognition statements that align your awareness with what has always been true. The impact of this simple morning practice extends far beyond those initial seconds. You're establishing a mindset that becomes the lens through which you experience everything that follows. That difficult conversation you've been dreading, you approach it from a different foundation. The financial pressure that's been keeping you awake at night, you face it. With access to divine wisdom that transcends material circumstances. The relationship tension that usually triggers immediate reactivity. You respond from a deeper place of spiritual grounding. Now, I want to go even deeper into what makes this practice so transformative. Throughout your day, you'll encounter countless moments where the material world screams for your attention, demanding that you forget this inner truth. Challenges will arise that seem to contradict everything about divine presence and kingdom consciousness. This is precisely where the journey becomes real, where theoretical understanding transforms into lived experience, where the revelations move from your mind into your actual daily existence. If you've ever experienced a moment where you suddenly felt connected to something greater than yourself, where peace arrived unexpectedly amid chaos, write in the comments, "I felt the presence within." The hidden truth that most spiritual seekers miss is surprisingly simple. Consistency matters infinitely more than intensity. We live in a culture obsessed with dramatic breakthroughs, peak experiences, and life-changing moments. You've probably tried this approach yourself, waiting until you hit rock bottom or face a crisis, then throwing yourself into hours of desperate prayer, hoping that sheer intensity will finally break through the spiritual barrier you've been feeling. But here's what actually creates transformation. 5 minutes of presence practiced daily will reshape your consciousness far more effectively than occasional marathon prayer sessions driven by crisis and fear. Your spiritual receptors don't respond to dramatic overhauls. They're fine-tuned through gentle, consistent adjustments that gradually align your awareness with the I am presence already within you. If these teachings about awakening the I am within resonate with you, subscribe to continue this journey together. Each video translates profound spiritual truths into practical steps you can implement in your daily life. Think of it like caring for a living plant. You don't ignore it for weeks and then dump gallons of water on it in a single, desperate attempt to revive it. That approach creates damage, not growth. Instead, you provide small amounts of nourishment daily, and the plant thrives naturally. Your spiritual awareness works exactly the same way. The journey of awakening unfolds through small, repeated recognitions that compound over time into profound shifts in how you experience reality. Behind the scenes of what looks like sudden spiritual awakening is usually months or years of these quiet, consistent practices. The impact becomes visible all at once, but the foundation was built through countless small decisions to return to presence, to acknowledge the kingdom within, to choose awareness over automatic reaction. This is where the practice becomes beautifully practical. Throughout your day, especially during challenging moments, you have decision points that either reinforce old patterns or create new spiritual pathways. When your boss delivers harsh criticism, you have about 3 seconds before your conditioned response kicks in. When traffic makes you late for an important meeting, there's a brief window before anxiety floods your system. When unexpected bills arrive in your inbox, you face a choice about which consciousness you'll respond from. These are precisely the moments where sacred pauses reveal their power. Even 30 seconds of returning to the inner kingdom create space for divine clarity to emerge beyond material appearances. You're not denying the external situation or pretending challenges don't exist. You're accessing a deeper reality that provides wisdom, peace, and guidance that transcends the immediate circumstance. The mindset shift happens gradually but unmistakably. At first, you might remember to pause only after you've already reacted, recognizing in hindsight that you had another option. That's perfect. That's progress. Then you begin catching yourself mid-reaction, inserting awareness into situations that previously triggered automatic responses. Eventually, the pause becomes natural, almost instinctive, as your default setting shifts from material consciousness to kingdom awareness. What makes this so transformative is that you're not adding something artificial to your life. You're removing the barriers to what has always been present, allowing the I am consciousness to express itself through even the most ordinary moments of your existence. If you're beginning to see how these small pauses could transform your daily experience, write in the comments, I choose presence over reaction. Now, I want to explore how this presence practice transforms 2 of the most anxiety-inducing areas of human experience: your physical health and financial well-being. These are the battlegrounds where fear most easily drowns out divine guidance, where material appearances seem most concrete and undeniable, where spiritual truth feels most abstract and impractical. The second sacred shift happens when physical symptoms appear in your body. Your conditioned response follows a predictable pattern: immediate panic, racing thoughts about worst-case scenarios, and an exclusive focus on material solutions, while your spiritual awareness completely shuts down. This reaction is so automatic that you probably don't even notice it happening. Fear floods your system before you've made a conscious decision about how to respond. But here's the transformation that changes everything. Before allowing panic to take control, you can turn within to recognize a deeper truth. In the kingdom of heaven within you, there is only wholeness and divine perfection. This isn't denial of physical reality or rejection of medical wisdom. It's accessing a spiritual dimension that creates sacred space where God's voice can speak clearly about your well-being, guiding you toward appropriate action from a foundation of peace rather than terror. The hidden truth behind healing isn't found exclusively in external remedies. It emerges when your consciousness aligns with divine wholeness, allowing that spiritual reality to express itself through your physical experience. This doesn't mean you ignore symptoms or refuse treatment. It means you bring a different quality of awareness to your health journey, one that opens channels for guidance and possibility that remain completely blocked when fear dominates your mindset. This same principle revolutionizes your relationship with money and resources. Financial concerns trigger our deepest survival fears, creating such intense static that divine guidance becomes virtually impossible to discern. You check your bank balance and feel your chest tighten. An unexpected expense arrives and anxiety floods your system. Income decreases, and suddenly you're making desperate decisions from a place of scarcity and panic. The third sacred shift invites you to recognize something profound. From kingdom perspective, divine substance is infinite and omnipresent. Your actual experience of supply is primarily a reflection of your consciousness, not external economic conditions. This revelation transforms how you approach every financial decision. Instead of reacting from fear and limitation, you're accessing divine wisdom that sees possibilities your anxious mind cannot perceive. Behind the scenes of what looks like financial breakthrough is often this fundamental change in awareness. When you stop making decisions from scarcity consciousness and start bringing kingdom awareness to practical matters like budgeting, earning, and spending, you create space for revelations about provision that would otherwise remain hidden. The impact extends far beyond the numbers in your account to transform your entire relationship with abundance, security, and trust. This isn't magical thinking that ignores practical financial planning. It's bringing divine consciousness to practical matters, allowing spiritual wisdom to inform material decisions rather than letting material panic override spiritual awareness. If you've experienced moments where divine guidance provided unexpected solutions to health or financial challenges, write in the comments, "The kingdom provides clarity." The transformation in your financial life becomes tangible when you understand that provision follows presence. This means that when unexpected expenses arrive or your income suddenly decreases, your first response isn't panic or scrambling for solutions from a place of fear. Instead, you return to the awareness that God's voice is speaking guidance, even in this exact circumstance. Every money decision becomes an opportunity to hear divine wisdom, rather than another source of anxiety that keeps you awake at night. This is where the practice moves from theory into reality. You're sitting at your kitchen table, bills spread out in front of you, and the numbers simply don't add up. The old mindset would spiral immediately into worst-case scenarios and desperate strategizing. But with kingdom consciousness, you pause and recognize that divine intelligence sees possibilities that your anxious mind cannot access. You bring transformed presence to the practical work of budgeting and financial planning, allowing spiritual awareness to inform material decisions. The impact of this shift often surprises people. Unexpected opportunities appear. Creative solutions emerge that weren't visible through the lens of scarcity. The journey doesn't necessarily mean money magically appears, but you navigate financial challenges from a foundation of trust and clarity rather than reactive panic. Behind the scenes of what others might call financial breakthrough is simply this: consciousness aligned with divine abundance expressing itself through practical circumstances. Now I want to reveal how this same principle revolutionizes perhaps the most complex area of human experience, your relationships. The fourth sacred shift awakens when you recognize divine presence speaking within yourself, and then naturally begin perceiving it in others as well. This changes absolutely everything about how you interact with the people in your life. Think about your most challenging relationship right now. Maybe it's your spouse who seems to push every button you have. Perhaps it's a parent whose approval you've been seeking your entire life. It could be a colleague whose behavior constantly triggers frustration and resentment. The conditioned response is to focus on what's wrong with them, how they need to change, why they're making your life difficult. But here's the hidden truth that transforms relational dynamics. The catalyst for relationship transformation isn't finding perfect people or waiting for others to change. It's developing perfect listening to God's voice through every interaction, even the difficult ones. When you approach relationships from kingdom consciousness, you're accessing divine wisdom about how to respond, what to say, when to speak, and when to remain silent, how to set boundaries from love rather than fear. This doesn't make relationship challenges magically disappear. People will still say hurtful things, conflicts will still arise, disappointments will still occur. But you're navigating these experiences from an entirely different foundation, one that allows revelations about yourself and others that remain completely hidden when you're operating from reactive patterns and emotional triggers. The transformation in how you relate to others emerges naturally as you practice presence. You begin noticing the divine essence in people even when their behavior is challenging. You respond to situations with wisdom that surprises even yourself. The decisions you make in relationships come from deeper guidance rather than conditioned patterns of defense, attack, or withdrawal. If you're beginning to see how kingdom consciousness could transform your most important relationships, write in the comments, "I see the divine in others." The journey of awakening the I am within you is ultimately personal, something no one else can do for you. But here's a revelation that often surprises people on this path. Seeking spiritual community becomes essential as your awareness deepens. There's a hidden dynamic at work when multiple people practice presence together that's difficult to explain, but powerful to experience. The collective field of awareness often reveals guidance that might remain completely obscure to any individual practicing alone. Think of it as spiritual acoustics. Certain physical environments naturally amplify sound. Concert halls are designed with this principle in mind. Similarly, certain relational environments naturally amplify your ability to hear divine guidance. When you're surrounded by people who understand kingdom consciousness, who are also learning to recognize the presence within themselves, something shifts in the atmosphere. Revelations come more easily, insights emerge more clearly. The transformation that might take months alone can unfold in moments within authentic spiritual community. This doesn't mean you need to join formal organizations or abandon existing relationships. Sometimes the most powerful spiritual fellowship happens around kitchen tables, in living rooms, or through meaningful conversations with even one other person who shares your commitment to presence. The essential element isn't structure or size, it's shared awareness. Behind the scenes of many spiritual breakthroughs is this simple truth: we awaken more fully in community than in isolation. Now, I want to explore how kingdom consciousness revolutionizes one of the largest portions of your waking hours, your work life. For most people, their professional environment represents a spiritual dead zone where divine presence seems distant or completely irrelevant. The pressure of deadlines, office politics, and performance expectations creates a frequency of stress that drowns out any awareness of the I am within. The fifth sacred shift transforms this entire experience by reframing work from mere employment to spiritual expression. Imagine approaching your professional life not as something separate from your spiritual journey, but as one of its primary expressions. That project deadline that usually triggers anxiety becomes an opportunity to witness divine ideas emerging in perfect timing. That difficult colleague who normally sparks frustration becomes a chance to perceive the kingdom within both yourself and them, accessing unlimited intelligence through kingdom awareness rather than reacting from conditioned patterns. This mindset revolution doesn't require changing careers or finding spiritually oriented employment. It happens through bringing presence to whatever work you're already doing. The impact extends far beyond productivity metrics to transform the actual quality of your daily experience. You begin noticing creative solutions flowing naturally when your consciousness isn't constricted by stress and fear. You find yourself handling workplace challenges with wisdom that surprises even you. Subscribe to join this community of seekers who are learning to experience God's presence as a natural state of being. We explore insights that actually work in real life, not just in theory. The hidden truth behind Truly innovative work is this. Groundbreaking solutions rarely emerge from stressed, limited consciousness. They flow naturally when you access the unlimited intelligence that speaks through kingdom awareness, allowing divine creativity to express itself through your professional contributions. If this understanding of work as spiritual expression resonates with you, write in the comments, "My work becomes sacred." As kingdom consciousness matures through your consistent practice of these sacred shifts, you discover something precious that goes beyond any specific benefit or outcome. You awaken to an authentic peace that doesn't depend on circumstances being perfect. This isn't the artificial calm that comes from temporarily having everything under control. It's a foundational frequency of tranquility that transcends whatever situation you're facing. The hidden truth here is profound. When you position yourself to feel God's presence clearly, what you discover isn't just guidance about specific decisions, though that certainly comes. What emerges is a deeper reality, an anchor of peace that remains steady through every challenge, loss, and disappointment. Financial setbacks still require practical action, but without the paralysis of fear. Relationship difficulties still need to be addressed, but without the drama of emotional reactivity. Health concerns still warrant appropriate care, but without being consumed by anxiety about outcomes. This transformation reveals the ultimate impact of practicing presence. Divine guidance flows with remarkable clarity when your consciousness isn't clouded by constant worry and stress. You begin navigating life from a place of groundedness that others notice even if they can't quite explain what's different about you. Behind the scenes of this unshakable peace is simply consistent recognition of the I am presence within you, creating a stability that external circumstances cannot shake. Now, I want to be completely honest with you about what this journey actually demands. The pathway to awakening the divine consciousness within requires something that challenges our instant gratification culture, consistent commitment regardless of immediate results. This isn't a weekend workshop that produces instant enlightenment. It's not a 21-day challenge that permanently transforms your awareness. The transformation unfolds through consistent small shifts rather than dramatic singular events. Here's the reality that most spiritual teachers won't tell you directly. Some people begin this practice and experience remarkable breakthroughs within weeks. Others work diligently for months or even years before significant changes become visible in their experience. A few grow impatient when miracles don't materialize immediately and abandon the practice altogether. The decisive factor isn't spiritual talent or divine favoritism. It's simple persistence. Each recognition, each moment you return to presence, each sacred pause throughout your day creates subtle adjustments in your spiritual receptors. You're gradually tuning yourself to divine frequency with increasing precision. Think about the most meaningful transformations in your life. Did any of them happen overnight? Real change, the kind that fundamentally reshapes your experience, almost always unfolds through accumulated small decisions rather than singular dramatic moments. The mindset shift required here goes against everything modern society teaches about achievement and progress. We've been conditioned to expect immediate results in virtually every domain. We bring this same expectation to spiritual practice, wanting instant connection with the divine presence within. But consciousness unfolds according to its own natural timing, and your role is to create optimal conditions through consistent practice rather than demanding immediate outcomes. If you're willing to embrace this journey of gradual awakening, trusting the process even when immediate results aren't visible, write in the comments, "I trust divine timing." Now I want to share perhaps the most liberating truth of this entire journey. You can begin right now, exactly where you are, with whatever understanding you currently possess. You don't need to master complex theology first. You don't need years of meditation experience. You don't need to become someone different or achieve some advanced spiritual status before you're qualified to recognize the I am presence within you. The kingdom of heaven exists within you at this very moment. It has always been there, waiting patiently beneath the surface of your everyday awareness. Your recognition doesn't create divine guidance. It simply reveals what has always been speaking, always been present, always been available to you. Even 3 seconds of genuine acknowledgement creates space for divine clarity to emerge through the noise and distraction of daily life. This contradicts so much of what we've been taught about spiritual development. We've been conditioned to believe that divine connection requires elaborate preparation, special techniques, or rare spiritual gifts. But here's the hidden truth that changes everything. Your ability to feel God's presence isn't something you need to build through years of effort. It's something you simply recognize as already complete within your consciousness. The practical pathway forward is remarkably simple. Start today, this very moment, by acknowledging as often as you remember, the kingdom of heaven is within me now. Divine presence is my true nature. The I am consciousness speaks through my awareness, regardless of external circumstances. This recognition isn't complicated or esoteric. It's a simple return to truth that anyone can practice anywhere, anytime. Behind the scenes of your personal awakening, something beautiful begins happening that extends far beyond your individual experience. Your spiritual journey naturally ripples outward and touches countless lives around you. As you practice feeling God's presence more clearly through these 5 sacred shifts, you become a living example that quietly inspires others without you even trying or intending to teach them anything. The transformation happens organically. When you respond to challenges from kingdom awareness rather than reactive fear, you demonstrate a different way of being that others naturally notice. They may not understand what's different about you, but they sense something has shifted. Your calm in the middle of chaos becomes an invitation for them to consider that perhaps peace is possible, even when circumstances are difficult. The impact of your practice creates ripples that extend in directions you'll never fully see or measure. A colleague watches how you handle a crisis at work and begins questioning their own reactive patterns. A family member notices your transformed approach to conflict and starts wondering what's changed in you. A stranger in line at the grocery store feels something in your presence that plants a seed of possibility in their consciousness. This isn't about becoming a spiritual teacher or trying to convert others to your way of thinking. It's simply the natural result of living from divine truth in everyday situations. Your willingness to recognize the kingdom within becomes silent permission for others to acknowledge the same reality in themselves, creating transformation that multiplies far beyond what any individual could accomplish alone. If you're beginning to sense how your own awakening might serve something larger than yourself, write in the comments, "My presence impacts others." If you've stayed with me through this entire journey, you're exactly the kind of person this message was meant to reach. There's something in you that's already awakening to these truths, already recognizing the divine presence that's been speaking within you all along. That recognition brought you here, and it's going to continue guiding you forward. I create these videos for people like you, seekers who are ready to move beyond surface-level spirituality into genuine transformation. If this teaching resonated with something deep inside you, I'd love for you to subscribe and join this community of people who are practicing presence in their daily lives. Each video we create together explores practical ways to experience the I am consciousness more fully, translating profound spiritual truths into steps you can actually implement today. If this message felt like it was speaking directly to your heart, write in the comments, "The kingdom awakens within me." Your story might be exactly what another person needs to hear to begin their own journey of recognition. There's real power in acknowledging these truths out loud, even if it's just through a few typed words. And if you found value in what we explored today, if even one insight shifted something in your awareness, consider tapping that like button. Not for algorithms or numbers, but as a quiet acknowledgement between us that this conversation mattered, that these truths still have power to transform lives in our distracted, anxious world. There's a video right here about maintaining divine awareness through life's most challenging circumstances. It builds beautifully on everything we've discussed today, showing you how to sustain this connection even when external conditions seem to contradict spiritual truth. Click and continue with me over there as we go deeper into living from kingdom consciousness. Until we meet again, remember, the I Am presence is within you right now, closer than your breath, waiting only for your recognition. Have you ever felt like there's an invisible wall between you and God, blocking the very blessings you've been desperately praying for? Perhaps you've spent years reaching outward, sending prayers into what feels like an empty void, wondering why divine energy seems to flow freely into others' lives, but somehow bypasses yours completely. What if I told you that the greatest spiritual misunderstanding of our time isn't about what you're doing wrong, but about where you've been looking? This fundamental misconception has kept countless sincere spiritual seekers trapped in a cycle of frustration, constantly straining to connect with a divine presence they believe exists somewhere out there beyond their reach. Has this ever happened to you? You face a crisis, perhaps a health scare, relationship breakdown, or financial emergency, and immediately begin praying intensely, begging for divine intervention, yet feeling that heavenly assistance remains frustratingly unavailable. You're not alone. This experience is nearly universal because we've been taught to look in the wrong direction entirely. The revolutionary understanding I'm about to share with you today doesn't just transform your prayer practice. It completely reimagines your relationship with divine energy and how it flows through every aspect of your daily life. The divine flow you've been seeking isn't blocked by some cosmic gatekeeper requiring the perfect passwords or rituals. It's blocked by a single misperception about where God actually is. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover might fundamentally change your entire relationship with spiritual practice. When you truly grasp that divine presence isn't something external you need to strain toward, but rather the very essence of your being waiting to be recognized, everything changes. Prayer transforms from desperate pleading to joyful acknowledgement of what already exists within you. Imagine approaching each day not as a separate entity struggling through life alone, but as a living channel through which divine energy naturally flows. Picture facing challenges not with fear and anxiety, but with an unshakable awareness that you can remove the internal blockages preventing divine intelligence from solving problems through you. This isn't positive thinking or wishful spirituality. It's practical mysticism that produces tangible transformation in your health, relationships, finances, and inner peace. The 5 steps I'll be sharing today have changed countless lives worldwide, not through magical formulas, but through a profound shift in spiritual understanding. What would your life look like if you stopped trying to convince an external deity to send blessings your way, and instead focused on removing the internal barriers that have been blocking the divine flow that has always existed within you? Perfect and complete. If these teachings on removing blocks to divine flow resonated with you, subscribe to join our community of spiritual seekers who are practicing this recognition in their daily lives. Each new video explores practical ways to experience the divine presence within. In these moments when divine energy seems most distant, the transformative journey begins with what Joel Goldsmith called the practice of the presence. A deceptively simple exercise that creates profound ripples throughout your consciousness. This isn't some complex meditation technique requiring hours of silence in perfect lotus position. It begins with a moment of recognition when you first wake up each morning, before your feet even touch the floor, before your mind becomes entangled in the day's demands. Pause for just a moment and silently acknowledge, the kingdom of heaven is within me right now. This divine flow is my true nature. This tiny decision creates a foundation that shapes how you'll respond to everything the day brings. The hidden revelation most spiritual seekers miss completely is that consistency matters far more than intensity. A brief moment of recognition practiced regularly throughout your day has infinitely more impact than occasional hours of desperate spiritual effort. It's the difference between watering a plant daily with a small cup versus drowning it once a month with a flood. Throughout your day, especially during moments of stress or challenge, take even 30 seconds to return to this inner kingdom. When your boss criticizes your work, when traffic makes you late, when unexpected bills arrive, these are precisely the moments when the practice reveals its transformative power. Instead of reacting immediately from fear or frustration, pause and recognize the truth that exists beyond external appearances. You'll begin noticing subtle shifts at first, a deeper peace in formerly stressful situations, unexpected solutions to persistent problems, a growing sense of guidance in daily decisions. These are signs that you're beginning to remove the internal barriers blocking divine flow. The transformations unfold gradually, but their cumulative impact completely reimagines your life experience. Now, I want to go even deeper into how this understanding applies to specific challenges we all face. Consider health issues, an area where fear can instantly overwhelm our spiritual awareness. When physical symptoms appear, our conditioned response is immediate panic, followed by exclusively seeking material solutions. The breakthrough insight isn't about rejecting medical wisdom or practical care. The journey I'm describing integrates both spiritual understanding and appropriate action. When facing health challenges, first turn within to recognize the spiritual truth. In the kingdom of heaven within you, there is only wholeness, only divine perfection. This recognition doesn't replace medical care, but opens a channel for healing power that transcends material limitations. From this place of spiritual awareness, you can then make decisions about treatment with clarity rather than fear. Think about someone diagnosed with a chronic condition who's been told they'll simply have to manage symptoms indefinitely. From material consciousness alone, this prognosis feels like a prison sentence. But from kingdom consciousness, they recognize that physical appearance isn't the final reality. Their spiritual essence remains whole, regardless of bodily conditions. This recognition creates space for healing that might otherwise be blocked by fear and resignation. You don't ignore symptoms or avoid doctors. You simply bring a different consciousness to the situation. You address physical needs while maintaining awareness of spiritual wholeness. If you've experienced even momentary glimpses where you sense there's more to reality than what appears on the physical surface, write in the comments, "I recognize the wholeness within." This understanding extends far beyond personal healing. The same profound shift in consciousness transforms our relationship with money and material supply. When confronting financial challenges, most people immediately focus on external actions, working harder, cutting expenses, or frantically searching for new income sources. While practical steps matter, the mindset behind those actions determines their effectiveness. The breakthrough insight is returning to the consciousness of the inner kingdom, where divine supply is infinite and eternally flowing. Let me share something from behind the scenes of financial transformation. A businessman I worked with faced complete financial ruin after his partner embezzled company funds. Creditors were demanding payment, legal troubles multiplied daily, and bankruptcy seemed inevitable. Rather than focusing solely on these external circumstances, he began practicing kingdom consciousness each morning and throughout his day. At first, nothing external changed. Bills still arrived, creditors still called, but something shifted internally. The paralyzing fear that had blocked creative solutions began dissolving. From this awareness, right action emerged naturally. He found himself making different decisions, having conversations he would have avoided before, exploring options that fear would have previously ruled out. Within weeks, opportunities appeared that he couldn't have engineered through external manipulation. A former client offered a substantial new contract. An unexpected settlement came through. A strategic partnership materialized. These weren't random coincidences, but consciousness demonstrating its own abundance. The pathway to complete financial recovery opened up not through force or struggle, but through spiritual recognition. This journey of transformation requires something many modern seekers resist: patience. In our world of instant results, we expect immediate spiritual breakthroughs. The hidden truth is that this transformation develops gradually over weeks and months of practice. You won't master this understanding overnight, and that's perfectly natural. Joel Goldsmith himself spent years developing this consciousness through meditation, study, and practical application. What matters is that you begin today with whatever level of understanding you currently possess. The consistency of your practice matters far more than its initial perfection. Some days you'll maintain kingdom consciousness beautifully. Other days you'll forget completely and spend hours in anxiety before remembering the kingdom within. This inconsistency isn't evidence of failure, but the normal rhythm of spiritual development. Consider how a child learns to walk. There are many falls for each successful step at first, yet with persistence, walking eventually becomes effortless. The same principle applies to spiritual awareness. Each time you return to kingdom consciousness after forgetting, you're strengthening that awareness. The path isn't linear. It includes plateaus and even apparent setbacks. But the overall trajectory moves toward increasing spiritual recognition. The profound impact comes in recognizing that you aren't creating this kingdom through positive thinking or willpower. You're simply recognizing what has always existed within you, waiting for your awareness. This revelation transforms spiritual practice from effortful self-improvement to joyful discovery of your true nature. If you've ever experienced the frustration of spiritual growth seeming too slow or inconsistent, write in the comments, "I'm embracing divine timing." The beauty of this practice becomes even more evident when we learn to recognize the subtle transformations that signal our growing awareness. While our mindset often looks for dramatic breakthroughs or miraculous interventions, the true revelations come in quieter moments. As you practice returning to kingdom consciousness, notice the subtle shifts occurring within your daily experience. First, a deeper peace in situations that would have previously triggered stress or anxiety. Then, unexpected solutions appearing for persistent problems that seemed unsolvable from purely material thinking. And perhaps most profound, a growing sense of divine guidance in daily decisions. These might seem like small changes, but they represent a fundamental shift in your inner landscape. You're beginning to live from kingdom consciousness rather than purely from material awareness. It's like learning to see with entirely new eyes. The world hasn't changed, but your perception of it has transformed completely. Where you once saw only problems, you now recognize opportunities. Where you once felt separation from good, you now experience divine presence. A woman in our community described this shift beautifully. After practicing kingdom consciousness for several months, she realized one day that her constant anxiety about the future had been replaced by a quiet confidence. Not because her external circumstances were more secure, they weren't, but because her awareness of the inner kingdom had become more consistent. This didn't mean she never experienced fear or worry again, but those emotions no longer dominated her consciousness or dictated her decisions. The secret pathway to experiencing these subtle shifts is persistence through the initial challenges. This is precisely where many spiritual seekers stumble on their journey. They begin this practice with enthusiasm, expecting immediate dramatic results, perhaps a miraculous healing or sudden financial windfall. When those instant miracles don't materialize, they conclude the approach doesn't work and abandon it prematurely, returning to the familiar but limiting material consciousness. The critical insight is understanding that spiritual development follows natural laws just as physical growth does. Think about planting a garden. When you place seeds in soil, nothing visible happens immediately. For days or even weeks, you see no evidence of growth. If you grew impatient and dug up the seeds to check on them, you'd interrupt the very process you're trying to foster. Spiritual practice works similarly. The initial work happens beneath the surface of your awareness, creating a foundation for visible transformation that appears in divine timing. Those who persist through this initial phase discover something far more valuable than instant gratification. An inner resource that sustains them through everything life brings. They develop a spiritual resilience that isn't dependent on circumstances being perfect. Subscribe now to continue this journey of spiritual discovery with us. We're dedicated to translating these profound mystical insights into practical steps you can apply immediately in your relationships, work, and inner peace. A businessman shared with me that after 6 months of consistent practice, he faced a crisis that would have previously sent him into panic and despair. Instead, he found himself responding from kingdom consciousness automatically without the effort it had required earlier in his journey. The practice that had once seemed difficult had become his natural state. This represents the maturation of spiritual awareness. What begins as conscious effort gradually becomes spontaneous expression. If you're committed to discovering the kingdom within, regardless of how long it takes, write in the comments, "I'm in this for the long journey." Now, I want to explore perhaps the most profound transformation that occurs when we remove the barriers to divine flow, the way it completely reimagines our relationships with others. Think about the people who challenge you most, that co-worker who constantly criticizes, the family member who triggers old wounds, or the stranger who cuts you off in traffic. Our instinctive reaction is defensiveness, judgment, or withdrawal. But kingdom consciousness offers an entirely different pathway when interacting with difficult people. The breakthrough insight is recognizing that the divine presence exists within them too, perfect even when obscured by stress, fear, or fatigue. Their behavior may not reflect this spiritual reality, but that doesn't diminish its truth. This recognition isn't about excusing harmful actions, but about seeing beyond the surface to the deeper reality. Imagine returning home after a challenging day to find your partner irritable and distant. From material consciousness, you'd likely react defensively or withdraw emotionally. But from kingdom consciousness, you recognize that they're dealing with their own challenges, that the divine presence within them remains perfect even when obscured. This recognition allows you to respond with compassion rather than escalating the tension. I witnessed this transformation in a corporate environment where two executives had been locked in conflict for months. After one began practicing kingdom consciousness, the entire dynamic shifted. Rather than reacting to perceived attacks, she began seeing her colleague through spiritual eyes, recognizing the pressure he was under and the divine intelligence operating even through his challenging personality. Without a single conversation about their conflict, the relationship transformed as her perception shifted. The revelation many spiritual seekers miss is that living from kingdom consciousness doesn't mean escaping daily challenges, but meeting them from a spiritual foundation. This isn't about floating above human experience in some mystical bubble. It's about engaging fully with life's complexities while maintaining awareness of the spiritual dimension behind all appearances. This journey includes both successes and setbacks. Some days you'll maintain spiritual awareness beautifully throughout challenges. Other days you'll fail completely and spend hours in anxiety or anger before remembering the kingdom within. This inconsistency isn't evidence of failure, but the normal rhythm of spiritual development. Behind the scenes of spiritual growth, each return to kingdom consciousness after forgetting builds neural pathways that make this awareness increasingly natural. What initially requires conscious effort gradually becomes your default perspective. The businessman who once struggled to maintain spiritual awareness for even minutes eventually finds it becoming his natural state throughout the day. The decision to practice kingdom consciousness transforms ordinary moments into opportunities for spiritual recognition. Washing dishes becomes a meditation on divine presence. Traffic delays offer space for inner communion. Challenging conversations become invitations to see beyond appearances to the spiritual reality within others. Life itself becomes your spiritual practice, an ongoing opportunity to remove the barriers that block divine flow. The beauty of this approach is how it infuses even the most mundane activities with profound meaning. That stack of paperwork on your desk? No longer just tedious tasks, but opportunities to express divine order and intelligence. The grocery shopping. Not just errands, but a chance to recognize abundance flowing through every aspect of your experience. If you've experienced those moments when spiritual awareness suddenly breaks through in the midst of ordinary activities, write in the comments, "I recognize divinity in the everyday." The true beauty of this practice emerges when we observe how it gradually transforms our entire experience of life. Over months and years of dedicated practice, something truly profound begins to shift in your awareness. The kingdom consciousness that once required deliberate effort becomes increasingly natural, like learning a language that eventually allows you to think in it rather than mentally translating every phrase. You'll notice that you automatically return to spiritual truth more quickly after being momentarily pulled into material fear or concern. This isn't something you force. It's the natural evolution of consistent spiritual recognition. Think of it as building momentum on a journey. Those initial steps require the most energy, but as you continue forward, you develop a rhythm that carries you naturally. A friend described this experience beautifully, saying that after a year of practice, she realized her first thought in challenging situations had shifted from panic to peace. Not because she was trying to be spiritual, but because kingdom consciousness had become her default perspective. The evidence of this transformation appears in practical ways throughout your life. Solutions to problems appear more readily because you're accessing the infinite intelligence of the kingdom within, rather than relying solely on limited personal thinking. Peace becomes more consistent because it's anchored in spiritual reality rather than fluctuating circumstances. Relationships deepen because you're interacting from authentic spiritual awareness rather than ego needs and defenses. The hidden revelation that transforms this journey is letting go of expectations for immediate dramatic results. Our culture conditions us to expect instant transformation, the spiritual equivalent of before and after photos on a weight loss program. But consciousness doesn't transform that way. The changes unfold organically, often so subtly that you don't notice them happening in real time. You may not even recognize the cumulative effect until you look back after 6 months or a year and realize how profoundly different your life has become. One of the most remarkable transformations occurs in your professional life. As kingdom consciousness becomes your natural state, work shifts from being merely a means of survival to an authentic expression of divine creativity flowing through you. This isn't just a nice spiritual idea. It manifests in tangible ways that transform your entire relationship with your career or business. A designer in our community described this shift beautifully. Where she once struggled for inspiration, constantly fighting creative blocks and deadline pressure, she now experiences a natural flow of ideas because she's tapped into infinite intelligence rather than relying solely on personal ability. Her work became not just more productive, but more fulfilling, an expression of spiritual essence rather than ego achievement. The behind-the-scenes revelation is how this consciousness transforms your relationship with challenges. Obstacles that would have previously overwhelmed you begin to feel like interesting puzzles to solve from spiritual awareness. A project deadline that once triggered anxiety now becomes an opportunity to witness divine ideas emerging in perfect timing. A difficult client interaction that would have sparked defensiveness becomes a chance to recognize the kingdom within both yourself and the other person. If you've started to notice your work becoming more of an authentic expression of something greater than yourself, write in the comments, "I'm becoming a clear channel." Now, I want to go even deeper into what may be the most significant breakthrough on this journey of removing the barriers to divine flow. As kingdom consciousness matures through consistent practice, you discover something precious beyond measure, an unshakable peace that doesn't depend on circumstances being perfect. This isn't positive thinking or emotional bypass. It's authentic spiritual awareness that remains steady through life's inevitable fluctuations. This peace becomes your foundation through every challenge, loss, and disappointment. When financial setbacks occur, you still take practical action, but without the paralysis of fear. When relationships face difficulties, you address them directly, but without the drama of emotional reactivity. When health concerns arise, you seek appropriate care, but without being consumed by worry about outcomes. A woman who had practiced kingdom consciousness for several years faced the unexpected loss of a spouse. Friends were amazed at her response, not an absence of grief, but a profound peace that coexisted with natural sorrow. She described knowing beyond intellectual understanding that the kingdom of heaven within had proven itself faithful through the darkest experience of her life. This wasn't resignation or spiritual bypassing, but direct experience of spiritual reality, transcending even death itself. This represents the maturation of spiritual understanding, moving from conceptual knowledge to lived reality. You know from direct experience that spiritual consciousness is the only reliable foundation because you've tested it through real-life challenges. Material conditions fluctuate constantly, but inner truth remains eternally steady. This doesn't make you immune to human emotion, but provides a deeper context for those emotions, like waves on the surface of an ocean that remains undisturbed in its depths. Let's be honest about what this path truly requires. The transformation we're discussing demands a level of commitment that most spiritual seekers are unwilling to make. This isn't a weekend workshop or a 21-day challenge that produces instant enlightenment. It requires daily practice, even when you feel absolutely no immediate results. faith in spiritual truth when material appearances seem to contradict it completely, and patience through the sometimes painfully gradual development process. Joel Goldsmith taught this path to thousands of students worldwide throughout his ministry. Some experienced dramatic breakthroughs within months. Others worked diligently for years before significant changes appeared visibly in their experience. A few grew impatient and abandoned the practice when immediate miracles failed to materialize. The decisive factor wasn't spiritual talent or divine favoritism, but simple persistence, the willingness to continue recognizing spiritual truth regardless of apparent results. This commitment represents a fundamental paradigm shift in our approach to spiritual growth. Our culture has conditioned us to expect immediate gratification in every area of life, from instant downloads to same-day delivery. We bring this same expectation to spiritual practice, wanting instant enlightenment or immediate healing. The revelation that transforms your journey is accepting that spiritual development follows natural laws that cannot be rushed or circumvented. If you've experienced that profound peace that transcends understanding, even briefly during a difficult time, write in the comments, "I've felt the kingdom's steadiness." The profound insight that stands at this crossroads of your spiritual journey is that you can begin right now, exactly where you are, with whatever understanding you currently possess. You don't need to master complex theology or achieve perfect meditation first. You don't need special spiritual credentials or decades of study. The kingdom of heaven is within you right now. It has always been there. It will always be there. Your recognition doesn't create it, but simply reveals what already exists eternally. This is perhaps the most liberating revelation of all. The divine flow isn't blocked by your lack of knowledge or spiritual achievement. It's only blocked by a misperception about where God actually is. The transformation begins with a single moment of recognition. The kingdom of heaven is within me now. Divine presence is my true nature. Spiritual perfection exists in consciousness regardless of material appearances. Simply start today, this moment, by recognizing as often as you remember this fundamental truth. Practice this recognition in the morning, throughout challenges before sleep. Be patient with yourself through the inevitable inconsistency. Celebrate small victories. Learn from temporary setbacks. What makes this approach uniquely powerful is that it doesn't require you to change who you are or adopt artificial spiritual behaviors. It simply invites you to recognize your true nature that has always existed beneath the surface of material appearances. Every time you turn within to acknowledge this spiritual truth, you're removing another layer of illusion that has kept you imprisoned in limitation and fear. The barriers to divine flow begin dissolving naturally through consistent recognition rather than through spiritual force or willpower. This isn't about creating something new, but unveiling what has always been there. The journey of awakening to kingdom consciousness doesn't happen in isolation. As your awareness deepens, it naturally ripples outward and touches countless lives. Around you, spiritual truth isn't meant to be held tightly as intellectual knowledge, but shared openly as lived experience. As the barriers to divine flow dissolve in your consciousness, you naturally become a clearer channel for this truth to reach others. This sharing rarely happens through preaching or persuasion. It occurs organically through your transformed presence. People notice the difference in how you respond to challenges, the peace you maintain in chaos, the compassion you extend. Where judgment once dominated, they're drawn to something they sense in you that they intuitively recognize as authentic. A business executive described how, after practicing kingdom consciousness for nearly 2 years, his entire leadership style transformed. Where he once led through force and fear, he now inspired through spiritual presence. His decisions emerged from inner listening rather than external pressure. Team members didn't necessarily know the source of this transformation, but they responded to its authenticity. This represents the maturation of spiritual understanding, moving from intellectually appreciating concepts to embodying them naturally in everyday interactions. You become a living demonstration that removing the barriers to divine flow creates not just personal transformation, but a ripple effect of healing in all your relationships and environments. If this understanding of becoming a clear channel for divine expression resonates with something deep within you, write in the comments, "The kingdom flows through me." As we draw this conversation to a close, I'm reminded of something profound that Joel Goldsmith often emphasized. Spiritual truth isn't meant to be held tightly as intellectual knowledge, but shared openly as lived experience. Your journey of recognizing the kingdom within doesn't happen in isolation. It ripples outward and touches countless lives around you. If these teachings have resonated with something deep within you today, I'd love to hear about your own experiences in the comments below. Simply write, "The kingdom within awakens," so I know you've journeyed with me to the end of this exploration. Your story might be exactly what another seeker needs to hear to begin their own practice of recognition. If you found value in this perspective on stopping the blockage of divine flow, consider gently tapping that like button, not for algorithms or metrics, but as a way of affirming that spiritual truth still matters in our distracted world. It's a small gesture that helps others discover these timeless principles. And if you're feeling called to continue this journey of spiritual discovery together, subscribe to join our growing community of seekers committed to recognizing the divine presence in everyday life. We're exploring these profound truths every week, translating mystical understanding into practical living. There's a video right here about practicing the presence throughout your day that builds beautifully on what we've discussed today. Click and continue with me over there as we explore how to maintain spiritual awareness through the specific challenges and opportunities of daily living. Until next time, remember, the kingdom of heaven is within you right now, waiting only for your recognition.
What I'm about to share with you was considered so revolutionary that Joel Goldsmith hesitated for years before teaching it publicly. This single prayer technique has dissolved financial crises, healed broken relationships, and transformed lives in ways that seem impossible. But here's what most people don't understand about this method. It's not about asking for anything. It's not about pleading or bargaining with God. This prayer works by recognizing something that's already true, something that exists right now in this very moment. The students who discovered this technique often said the same thing. They felt a sudden shift in consciousness, like stepping out of a dream into reality. Problems that seemed insurmountable simply began dissolving without struggle or effort. Joel called this the prayer of recognition, and it works on a principle that revolutionizes everything you think you know about prayer. Instead of asking God to change your circumstances, you recognize that God's perfection is already present where the problem appears to be. Remember, this is a spiritual practice that works alongside, never replaces, professional care when you need it. This technique addresses the consciousness level where all problems originate, creating space for practical solutions to emerge naturally. Here's the exact technique. When facing any challenge, you simply declare with inner conviction these words: God's perfect solution is already here. I recognize divine order operating now. This situation is resolved in God's infinite wisdom. The power isn't in the words themselves. It's in the recognition that shifts your consciousness from seeing a problem to recognizing God's presence. This usually takes consistent practice over weeks or months to fully integrate. What makes this prayer so effective is that it stops the mental activity that keeps problems alive. Most people pray by describing their problems to God, unknowingly reinforcing the very conditions they want to change. This technique does the opposite. You're not trying to convince God of anything. You're aligning your consciousness with what's already true in spiritual reality. The moment you make this recognition, you step out of problem consciousness into solution consciousness. Students often ask me how long this takes to work. The consciousness shift can happen immediately, but the outer manifestation usually unfolds gradually. Some see changes within days, others need weeks of consistent practice before breakthrough occurs. The key is persistence without desperation. You practice this recognition not because you need God to do something, but because you're training yourself to see what's already there. This is why Joel considered it the most powerful prayer ever revealed. Here's what Joel discovered through decades of spiritual healing work. Every problem exists only in human consciousness. In God's consciousness, which is the only real consciousness, perfection is eternally established and can never be disturbed or threatened. When you practice the prayer of recognition, you're not changing God's mind about your situation. You're changing your own consciousness to align with God's eternal perfection. This shift in perception allows divine solutions to manifest naturally. The beauty of this approach is its simplicity. You don't need special training or years of study. You just need the willingness to stop seeing problems and start recognizing God's presence. Even children can master this technique with remarkable results. This is the foundation that transformed thousands of lives through Joel's ministry. But understanding the technique is just the beginning. Let me share some remarkable stories of how this prayer has worked in real situations. Margaret, a single mother from Portland, discovered this prayer when facing eviction. She'd been unemployed for 3 months, and every job application seemed to lead nowhere. Desperation had become her constant companion, creating more anxiety and blocking opportunities. Instead of praying for a job, she began practicing the prayer of recognition daily. God's perfect provision is already here. I recognize divine order operating now. My financial needs are resolved in God's infinite wisdom. At first it felt strange, almost naive. But something shifted after 2 weeks of consistent practice. She stopped focusing on lack and started noticing possibilities. A conversation with her neighbor revealed a part-time opportunity she'd never considered. Within a month, this led to full-time employment. Margaret later said the most remarkable thing wasn't finding the job. It was how her consciousness had changed from desperate seeking to confident knowing. She'd learned to recognize God's provision even before it appeared in form. David, an accountant from Denver, used this prayer when his marriage seemed beyond repair. Years of accumulated resentment had created what felt like an unbridgeable gap between him and his wife. Traditional counseling had helped, but something deeper needed healing. He began applying the recognition prayer to their relationship. God's perfect love is already here. I recognize divine harmony operating now. This marriage is resolved in God's infinite wisdom. The practice required months of consistent application. The breakthrough came gradually. Instead of focusing on his wife's faults, David began recognizing the divine love that existed between them. His changed consciousness created space for genuine communication and renewed intimacy to emerge naturally. 6 months later, they celebrated their renewed marriage. David realized that the problem had never been their circumstances. It was his consciousness that needed transformation, and the prayer of recognition provided exactly that. Sarah, a business owner from Atlanta, faced bankruptcy after a major client canceled their contract. Years of building her consulting firm seemed to crumble overnight. Fear consumed her thoughts, making clear thinking nearly impossible for several weeks. A friend introduced her to Joel's teachings, and she began practicing the recognition prayer regarding her business crisis. God's perfect solution is already here. I recognize divine order operating now. This situation is resolved in God's infinite wisdom. The shift wasn't immediate. For the first month, doubt battled with faith. But gradually, her perspective changed from seeing disaster to recognizing opportunity. New clients appeared, and innovative solutions emerged that she couldn't have imagined in her fearful state. Within 8 months, her business had not only recovered but expanded beyond its previous size. Sarah learned that problems often contain the seeds of greater good, visible only through transformed consciousness. James, a teacher from Boston, struggled with chronic anxiety that had affected his work and relationships for years. Medical treatment helped manage symptoms, but the underlying mental patterns seemed unchanged despite various therapeutic approaches he'd tried. He discovered the prayer of recognition through Joel's writings and began applying it to his anxiety. God's perfect peace is already here. I recognize divine calm operating now. My mind is resolved in God's infinite wisdom. Progress came in waves over several months. The anxiety didn't disappear overnight. But something profound shifted in how he related to anxious thoughts. Instead of fighting them, he began recognizing the peace that existed beneath them. This recognition gradually dissolved the power anxiety held over his life. A year later, James described feeling like he'd awakened from a long nightmare. The recognition prayer had taught him to identify with his spiritual nature rather than his anxious thoughts, creating lasting transformation. If you're feeling inspired by these transformation stories, like this video to help others discover these powerful teachings, subscribe to the channel for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and in the comments share what resonated most with you from these healing journeys. Now let me teach you Joel's second powerful technique that amplifies the prayer of recognition. He called it spiritual treatment, and it works by treating the false beliefs that create problems, rather than treating the problems themselves directly. Here's how it works. Every problem has a corresponding false belief supporting it. Financial lack comes from believing in limitation. Relationship conflict comes from believing in separation. Health challenges come from believing in vulnerability rather than wholeness. Spiritual treatment involves recognizing these false beliefs and replacing them with spiritual truth. For financial challenges, you recognize abundance as God's nature. For relationship problems, you recognize love as the only reality. For health issues, you recognize perfection as your true identity. The process is simple but requires understanding. You identify the false belief, reject it consciously, then recognize the spiritual truth that replaces it. This combination with the prayer of recognition creates powerful transformation. Let me give you a specific example of spiritual treatment in action. When facing financial pressure, most people focus on getting money. But Joel taught that the real issue is consciousness of lack, not actual shortage of supply. The treatment begins with recognition. There is no lack in God. Therefore, there can be no real lack anywhere. I reject the belief in limitation as having no power over God's child. I recognize infinite abundance as my true inheritance, available now. This isn't positive thinking or affirmation. It's recognizing what's spiritually true and allowing that truth to transform your consciousness. The changed consciousness then attracts circumstances that reflect this inner abundance rather than inner lack. Students who master this approach often report that money concerns simply fade away, not because they suddenly became wealthy, but because they'd learned to identify with their spiritual abundance rather than material appearances. Joel's third transformative technique addresses what he called the human effort trap. Most people try to solve problems through personal will and struggle, unknowingly blocking the very help they're seeking from infinite intelligence. The grace method involves stepping back from personal effort and allowing divine intelligence to provide solutions. This doesn't mean becoming passive, but rather becoming receptive to guidance that transcends human thinking and limitation. Here's how you practice it. When facing any challenge, after using the prayer of recognition, you add this powerful declaration. I step back from human effort. Divine intelligence is providing the perfect solution. I am open and receptive to guidance. Then you listen. Not with your ears, but with your consciousness. Ideas will come. Opportunities will appear. People will show up. The solutions that emerge through this receptive state are often more creative than anything human thinking could devise. The grace method transformed how Linda, a graphic designer from Seattle, approached her creative blocks. Instead of forcing inspiration, she learned to recognize that divine creativity was always available and seeking expression through her consciousness. When stuck on projects, instead of struggling, she would declare, I step back from human effort. Divine creativity is providing perfect inspiration. I am open and receptive to new ideas. Then she would wait in receptive silence. The results amazed her clients. Ideas flowed with unprecedented originality and effectiveness. Her business expanded naturally as word spread about her innovative designs, but more importantly, work became joyful rather than stressful. Linda discovered that divine intelligence has solutions available that human thinking cannot reach. The grace method taught her to access this unlimited creativity by stepping out of personal effort into spiritual receptivity. Now let's address the most common obstacle students face when learning these techniques. The logical mind rebels against recognizing perfection while experiencing problems. This mental resistance can block the very transformation you're seeking. Joel taught that doubt is actually a form of prayer. When you doubt that divine perfection is present, you're unconsciously praying for problems to continue. The key is learning to doubt your doubts, rather than doubting the truth. Here's the technique for handling resistance. When doubt arises, don't fight it. Instead, recognize it as impersonal mental activity with no power over spiritual truth. Then return to your recognition prayer with renewed understanding. This process usually takes several weeks to establish. Be patient with yourself. Every spiritual master has faced the same mental resistance. The difference between success and failure is persistence in recognizing truth despite temporary appearances. Another challenge students encounter is expecting immediate outer results. The prayer of recognition works first at the consciousness level, then manifests gradually in outer experience. Understanding this prevents discouragement during the transformation process. Think of consciousness like soil and problems like weeds. The recognition prayer changes the soil, making it impossible for problem weeds to grow. But existing weeds may take time to wither as the soil transformation takes hold. This is why Joel emphasized consistent daily practice rather than crisis-only application. Regular recognition. Prayer keeps consciousness aligned with truth, preventing problems from taking root rather than just treating them after they appear. Students who understand this principle maintain their practice even when results aren't immediately visible. They know that consciousness transformation is occurring, and outer manifestation will follow according to divine timing and wisdom. Here's a practical obstacle many face: applying these techniques during emotional storms. When fear, anger, or grief overwhelm consciousness, recognition prayer can seem impossible or ineffective despite your best efforts. Joel's solution was what he called the stepping stone technique. Instead of trying to leap from emotional chaos directly to recognition of perfection, you take intermediate steps that gradually elevate consciousness to a receptive state. Start by recognizing that the emotion isn't your true identity. I am not this fear. I am not this anger. I am not this grief. These are temporary experiences passing through consciousness, but they are not who I am. Then recognize what you are. I am God's beloved child, eternally safe and loved. From this elevated consciousness, the prayer of recognition becomes natural and effective, creating genuine transformation rather than spiritual bypassing. The final common challenge is applying these techniques to chronic or recurring problems. Some students worry that if the recognition prayer really worked, problems would never return once they'd been treated spiritually. Joel explained that recurring problems indicate consciousness patterns that need deeper transformation. Each time you apply recognition prayer to the same issue, you're working at progressively deeper levels of consciousness, creating more permanent change. Think of it like physical exercise. One workout doesn't create permanent fitness. Regular practice develops strength that eventually becomes effortless and natural. Spiritual practice works the same way, building consciousness strength through consistent application. The key is viewing recurring challenges as opportunities for deeper spiritual development rather than evidence of failure. Each application of recognition prayer strengthens your ability to identify with spiritual truth rather than human appearances. If these techniques for overcoming challenges are speaking to your heart, like this video to support this content, subscribe to the channel for more advanced spiritual practices, and in the comments write, which obstacle are you most ready to transform using these principles? Now let me share Joel's most advanced technique for those ready to deepen their practice. He called it Christ consciousness recognition, and it goes beyond solving individual problems to establishing permanent identification with your spiritual nature. This technique recognizes that the Christ consciousness that Jesus demonstrated is actually the true identity of every person. Not Jesus the man, but the divine consciousness that expressed through him and seeks to express through you. Here's the practice. In meditation or quiet moments, recognize, the same Christ consciousness that Jesus expressed is my true identity right now. I am the beloved child in whom God is well pleased. Divine love, wisdom, and power express naturally through me. This isn't claiming to be Jesus, but recognizing the same divine nature he revealed. As this recognition deepens through daily practice, you begin living from Christ consciousness rather than human personality, transforming everything automatically. When Michael, a therapist from Phoenix, began practicing Christ consciousness recognition, his entire approach to helping clients transformed. Instead of seeing people as broken and needing fixing, he began recognizing their inherent divine wholeness. This shift in perception created remarkable healing in his practice. Clients responded to his recognition of their true spiritual nature, often achieving breakthroughs more quickly than traditional methods had produced in his previous years of work. Michael learned to hold people in the truth of their spiritual identity while compassionately addressing their human experiences. This combination created space for genuine transformation rather than just symptom management or coping strategies. His practice expanded naturally as word spread about his unique approach. But more importantly, Michael discovered his own calling to be a transparency for divine love, making his work deeply fulfilling rather than emotionally draining. Christ consciousness recognition also transforms how you handle daily challenges and interactions. Instead of reacting from personality patterns, you respond from your spiritual center, bringing divine qualities into every situation automatically. When someone is angry or difficult, instead of taking it personally, you recognize, this person is God's beloved child, expressing imperfectly right now. I see through their behavior to their true spiritual nature and respond from love rather than reaction. This practice doesn't make you passive or naive. It gives you access to divine wisdom and strength that human personality cannot provide. You become more effective in handling difficulties because you're operating from unlimited spiritual resources. The transformation in relationships is often dramatic. People respond to the love and wisdom you express from Christ consciousness, even when they can't explain why they feel different around you after your practice deepens. Joel's final technique addresses manifestation from the highest spiritual level. Instead of trying to attract specific things, you recognize divine design as already established for your life, containing everything needed for your complete fulfillment. Here's how divine design recognition works. You acknowledge that infinite intelligence has already designed your perfect life expression, including all necessary supply, relationships, opportunities, and experiences. Your role is recognition, not creation. The practice involves declaring, divine intelligence has designed my perfect life. Everything I need is already included in this divine design. I recognize and accept God's will for me, knowing it exceeds my human wishes and imagination. This technique eliminates struggle around manifestation. Instead of trying to force outcomes, you become receptive to divine design unfolding naturally. The results often surprise you with their perfection and timing beyond human planning. Rebecca, an artist from Nashville, discovered divine design recognition during a career crisis. Her artwork wasn't selling, and financial pressure tempted her to abandon her calling for more practical employment that wouldn't fulfill her soul. Instead of forcing career decisions, she began recognizing, divine intelligence has designed my perfect creative expression. All necessary support and opportunities are included in this design. I trust and accept God's plan for my artistic fulfillment. Within months, unexpected opportunities emerged. A gallery owner discovered her work through an unlikely connection. Corporate clients began commissioning pieces. Her income from art eventually exceeded what practical jobs would have provided. Rebecca learned that divine design is always more generous and creative than human planning. By trusting this design instead of forcing her own ideas, she discovered fulfillment she never imagined possible. Integration is the final key to mastering Joel's teachings. These techniques aren't separate practices, but aspects of one unified understanding. Your true identity is spiritual, and all problems exist only in the illusion of separation from this truth. The prayer of recognition, spiritual treatment, the grace method, Christ consciousness, and divine design recognition all serve one purpose. They help you remember who you really are and live from that remembrance consistently. Daily practice becomes not just problem solving, but identity establishment. Each time you choose recognition over reaction, truth over appearance, you strengthen your ability to live as the spiritual being you truly are. This is Joel's ultimate gift to humanity. Not just techniques for healing problems, but a complete way of living from spiritual consciousness that makes problems increasingly irrelevant to your experience. Here's your daily practice for integrating everything you've learned. Begin each morning with 5 minutes of Christ consciousness recognition, establishing your spiritual identity as the foundation for the day ahead. When challenges arise, apply the prayer of recognition immediately. God's perfect solution is already here. I recognize divine order operating now. This situation is resolved in God's infinite wisdom. Don't wait for problems to grow larger. Use spiritual treatment for persistent challenges, identifying and rejecting false beliefs while recognizing spiritual truth. Apply the grace method when human effort reaches its limits, becoming receptive to divine solutions. End each day by recognizing divine design in everything that occurred. This practice transforms even difficulties into spiritual opportunities, maintaining the consciousness that attracts continued good into your experience. You now possess the same spiritual tools that transformed thousands of lives through Joel Goldsmith's ministry. But tools are only as powerful as your commitment to using them consistently and faithfully. Remember, these aren't emergency techniques for crisis moments only. They're a complete approach to living from your true spiritual nature. Daily practice creates the consciousness that prevents problems rather than just healing them after they appear. The prayer of recognition that seemed so simple when we began is actually the most revolutionary spiritual technique ever revealed. It transforms you from someone who has problems into someone who recognizes solutions, from victim to victor. Your spiritual journey accelerates from this moment forward. Every time you choose recognition over reaction, you're building the consciousness that makes miracles natural and problems impossible. This is your inheritance as God's beloved child. If you feel your spiritual understanding has expanded after discovering these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video, subscribe to the channel because I have more transformative teachings waiting for you. And in the comments write, "I am transformed," to confirm your commitment to this new spiritual path.